The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
I am astounded by the number of Longhorn fans who don't believe that Sean Miller is a good hire.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
I said yesterday that it felt like the initial reaction amongst Texas fans was whelmed. It didn't feel like people were overwhelmed with joy and excitement. And it didn't feel like people were underwhelmed with pain and misery. But the more that I've looked on message boards, on social media, on text conversations that I've had with friends who are Longhorn fans, the more I feel a sense of general disappointment with the hire. And I don't want to generalize here, right? I'm sure some of y'all out there are very excited about this hire. But again, it feels like the masses not super thrilled with the Sean Miller decision. I think I know why that is, and I don't agree with you. Now, look, if you were holding out hope that Jay Wright or Tony Bennett was going to come out of retirement to take this gig, or if you thought that Texas was going to be able to lure Bill Self away from Kansas, then I can't help you change your mind because Sean Miller isn't on the level of any of those guys. But how realistic were any of those guys? I mean, Jay Wright and Tony Bennett are done. I think they've been adamant about that for years now. And Bill Self has a lifetime contract at Kansas. He wasn't leaving that job for this one. If you thought, hey, maybe Billy Donovan, who has turned down dozens of college coaching jobs since leaving for the NBA a decade ago, if you thought he was going to quit an NBA job mid-season, basically preventing him from ever getting another NBA job in the future to come to Texas, I can't help you here as well. Again, I would have loved any of those names. I'm not here to argue that Sean Miller is a better option than those guys because we're talking about Hall of Famers. We're talking about national championship winners. We're talking about the creme de la creme of college basketball coaches in the 21st century. But those were all pipe dreams. Talking about the realistic candidates here and why Sean Miller is a great option compared to some of the other names that Longhorn fans have been throwing around since the Longhorns lost in the first four to Xavier last week. There are two things that I believe the general public really values when it comes to a new coaching hire. We are a very what have you done for me lately society, right? If you had told any Texas fan that Sean Miller was going to take over the Longhorns in 2018, they would have been pumped because Sean Miller had just completed a stretch of 5 conference championships, 3 Elite Eights, 5 Sweet 16s, and 7 tournament appearances in an 8-year span. That's a pretty damn good run. This guy was regarded as one of the very best coaches in the sport at that time. But again, that was a while ago. Since 2018, Sean Miller has been linked to that huge FBI investigation that marred college basketball. He lost his job at Arizona. He had to sit out for a year. He went back to Xavier, and he just hasn't had the same success. 0 conference titles, 0 Elite Eights, just 1 trip to the Sweet 16 for Sean Miller in his last 6 years as a head coach. So you look at some of the other candidates, again, that were being discussed. Grant McCaslin, that guy's still coaching this year. He's got Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. Tommy Lloyd at Arizona, who replaced Sean Miller. He's got Arizona in the Sweet 16. He's still coaching. TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State just got bounced yesterday. But the last couple of years, look, Iowa State was a 2 seed last season. They made it to the Sweet 16. They were a 3 seed this season and got bounced in the round of 32, which was obviously 1 round further than Sean Miller went with his Xavier team. So those guys are all being talked about a lot more because of what they've done lately. Here's where I defend Sean Miller. None of those 3, McCaslin, Lloyd, Otzelberger, have the resume that Sean Miller has. In his career, Sean Miller has won 8 regular season conference crowns, 5 at Arizona, 3 at Xavier. He's won 4 conference tournament titles. He's been to the Sweet 16 8 times, and he's been to the Elite Eight 4 times. He's done all of those things in 20 years as a Division I college basketball coach. If you take those other three names, McCaslin, Otzelberger, and Lloyd, and you combine all of their resumes, they've won 6 regular season conference titles, only 2 of them in a major conference, by the way. They've won 5 conference tournament titles, only 2 of them in a major conference. They've been to 5 total Sweet 16s. They've been to 0 Elite Eights in 21 years as Division I college basketball coaches. Again, I'm not just picking and choosing random stats. I'm not doing 1 versus 1 here. I'm doing Sean Miller versus all 3 of those guys combined. Sean Miller has more conference titles. He's got more second weekend trips. He's been to 4 Elite Eights when those other 3 coaches have yet to reach 1. So this is not to dunk on those 3 guys. I would have been happy if any of them replaced Rodney Terry here in Austin. But the sense that I'm getting from a lot of Longhorn fans is that they would have strongly preferred any of those guys over Miller. It doesn't care if it's McCaslin, Lloyd, or Otzelberger. Just give me one of those 3 over this guy. Again, I think they would have been great, but it feels like people think Sean Miller is just and all 3 of those guys are a hell of a lot better, when in reality, Miller has done more than all 3 of those names combined. And I also think that people just want the rising star, right? They want the next big thing. They want the up-and-comer. That's kind of what Chris Beard was when he got this gig in Austin. Think about all those movies and TV shows where the aging actor loses his job to the next big thing, the young star. You see it in sports all the time, too, where the veteran player gets phased out for the younger, flashier guy who can sell some new jerseys and put more butts in seats. That's what Otzelberger would have been. That's what Tommy Lloyd would have been. That's what McCaslin would have been. The rising stars on their way up, ready for their first shot at the big time. Sean Miller isn't that. Sean Miller was that guy when he took over the Arizona job about a decade and a half ago, but now at the age of 56, he's not that. Especially following his dismissal at Arizona and these last few seasons at Xavier, he's not regarded as the big, flashy name anymore. It's not a lot of sexiness involved with the Sean Miller hire. But once again, you go back to what he's done. If you hired any of those other guys, you were hoping that they were going to be able to have success at a high major job like the University of Texas. Sean Miller's already proven that he can have success in a very good conference. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 years. Like, McCaslin's been at Texas Tech for 2 years. Otzelberger's been at Iowa State for 4 years. Tommy Lloyd, I think 4 years at Arizona. Sean Miller, for more than a decade, was able to prove that he could be consistent both in the regular season and in the month of March as well. I know Sean Miller's never been to a Final Four. I get that. That's the biggest indictment against the otherwise very impressive resume of Sean Miller. I got to come up with a different word besides resume. I feel like I've said that too much. If you've turned this into a drinking game every time I've said that, you're probably hammered right now. I apologize for that. But I get that. He's never been to a Final Four. His tournament record is still very good. He's 22-13. If you look at the analytics, there's a stat called wins above expected in terms of how many tournament wins you're supposed to have each year versus how many tournament wins you actually have each year. Sean Miller is one of the best coaches. He's top 10 in America over the last 2 decades in that category. He has been a very, very good tournament coach despite not having made it to a Final Four. So to me, there's less risk involved with a Sean Miller hire than there would have been with any of those 3 guys. And then you look at a guy like Royale Ivey, who a lot of Texas fans were clamoring for. No shot at Royale Ivey, a fan favorite, part of the 03 Final Four team. You'd have had a lot of people excited with the potential of Ivey here in Austin. That guy's never been a college basketball coach, never been an assistant, let alone a head coach. You would have been hoping that he could figure it out. Same thing with a guy like Kellen Sampson, not Kelvin Sampson, but Kellen Sampson, who's the son of Kelvin, who's the lead assistant down at Houston. Like, some Texas fans were talking about him as well. You would have been hoping that that guy could come to Texas and be a very good high major college basketball coach. With Sean Miller, you don't have to hope. You've already seen him do it. You already know what he's capable of at a place where, honestly, basketball is a bigger deal at Arizona than it is at Texas. And he was able to handle that pressure and have a bunch of success at the University of Arizona, obviously before the FBI investigation kind of caused things to fall apart right there. But I like the Sean Miller hire. I think I said this stat yesterday. I'll say it one more time to wrap up this segment. Miller spent 12 years at Arizona. 8 of those 12 seasons were single-digit loss seasons. Texas has only had 4 single-digit loss seasons in the last 2 decades. That spans the latter stages of the Rick Barnes era. That spans Shaka Smart and Chris Beard and Rodney Terry. Sean Miller's the real deal. He's not the flashy up-and-comer rising star name anymore, but he's proven, and there's a reason why Chris Del Conte has had his eye on this guy for a couple of seasons. I'm a big fan of this move.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The tournament games happening almost every day. Women's tournaments, men's tournaments. It's all happening. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can check out some NBA lines. The interconference matchup in Detroit tonight. How about that? Pistons host the Spurs. Cade Cunningham and crew have been looking pretty good this season. They're favored against the Spurs. FanDuel has the Pistons laying 8.5. You know, it's not the real Spurs, but that's, you got to play who you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
Iowa basketball gets its guy. Ben McCollum is the new Iowa basketball coach.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes.
The Iowa men's basketball team has hired their new head coach. It is Ben McCollum, as we've been talking about throughout the last week now, after Darren DeVries made the decision to take the Indiana job. This was something that I think a lot of people anticipated. A lot of different arrows were pointing that direction. And here we are. So we're going to break things down, talk about roster construction, coaching staff construction, how we think things are going to look in that front, what Iowa's going to be able to do, some of the financial components to this. And yes, the portal is open. It is an important time, and Beth Getz got it done in time to make this, I think, very fruitful for Iowa. But we'll talk about all of that. Later this afternoon, the Iowa women are in action against Oklahoma with a shot to move on to the Sweet 16. We'll talk about that matchup. Huge weekend on the diamond as well. The baseball team with a sweep against Ohio State. And how about the Iowa softball team? Down 2 coaches, a lot of wild, wacky things happening inside that program. And now this be top 5 UCLA. How about that? We'll talk a little diamond, plus the weekend that was in wrestling, as we talked to you before the championship matches, 1 out of 3 in those final matches, but Stephen Buchanan wins gold, and certainly a great story there. So we got a lot to get into here today, but we open at the forefront of things, and it is the big news. Ben McCollum, the new Iowa head coach, and talk a little bit about him. So if you missed our podcast from the last week, we're with you every single day throughout the course of the week talking Hawkeyes. But if you did, just the background of Ben McCollum and getting to see him now firsthand, close to action throughout the course of this season. I'm located in Des Moines, live in Des Moines, and seeing what he was able to do with this Drake program. So if we go back to the end of January, when things were starting to fall apart for Iowa basketball, and I put out my first hot board, and in a way, it was a little flippant, right? It was kind of, I was not pleased after that performance out in LA. Let's just put it that way. And that's when I put it. And then they followed up with the loss to Minnesota. We knew it was trending. And it trended where I thought it was. Ray McCaffrey was going to be let go. But when I put together that list, Darren DeVries was at the top of it. DeVries was the guy, made a ton of sense. Local connections, building a brand, doing what he did at Drake, all the things that make a whole lot of sense we got into. McCollum was a little bit further down. I think my list wasn't in order, but I think I had Ben McCollum 4th at that time. Drake, of course, was out to an outstanding part. But the reason, at least initially, I was pretty tepid on Ben McCollum was very simply, they're playing incredibly slow. And that slow pace, after what we saw under Todd Licklider, I knew it was going to be difficult for the fan base to maybe jump aboard right away. Dive into the pool head first. We weren't going to be able to do that after what we watched during those 3 seasons. But it wasn't just the style of play. I mean, that wasn't alone in the problem that Todd Licklider had at Iowa. He was socially awkward. He was not a good recruiter. He didn't connect with the fan base. I mean, there's a long list, and that's just the start of it, of the reasons that he didn't get it done at Iowa. Slow pace was one of them, but not the only one. And I think we have to remember that. When you look at Ben McCollum and digging in and learning more about him, talking to more people that he's been connected to, this guy, he's a butt kicker. And he is a basketball savant. He knows the game incredibly well. He knows it at a high level. Those are all great things. But then to be able to teach it. And if you were just watching this weekend for the first time, if you watched Thursday night, the win against Missouri, even Saturday when they were just outmanned against Texas Tech, and with a couple of breaks or maybe a couple of different calls, that game could have been different. You watch the way that that team plays, and you see, starting with the point guard, and that's something that he is elite at, getting point guards to play at a high, high level. And you watch Bennett Sturts and just think, well, does this translate? Yeah, it's going to translate to the Big Ten. You watch the way that this group of guys, not the most athletic team, not a team that's going to wow you with athleticism, how they play so connected on both ends of the floor, how they're running their system. They're doing the things. It is ball movement. It is cuts. It is movement on the offensive end. Yes, it's limited possessions, but also the reason that they played with limited possessions this year is because they had to. They weren't deep. And also remember, when he put together this roster at Drake, he didn't get the job early in the process. They were going through a run in the D2 playoffs. And because of that, he was already behind the 8 ball, coupled with Drake does not have the financial resources, certainly of an Iowa. Even at the mid-major level, Drake is not at the top of the heap financially when it comes to NIL, when you're talking about that next tier guy. And he was able to build a roster, helped by 4 guys from Northwest Missouri State, but also going out, bringing in a couple guys from Wyoming. Went to Indiana State for a player. They were able to cobble together a roster without a whole lot of depth, but was able to do what they did. Reaching the round of 32, getting a win outside of the first 4 for the first time since 1971 at Drake. Doing something that Darren DeVries couldn't do at Drake. Win a game in the round of 64. Ben McCollum was able to do that in year number 1. His past offenses played at a quicker pace, but he is a coach. He is a coach that is going to work with the style of play that makes the most sense for his team. He's not going to try to put a round hole into a square peg. That's not who he is as a coach. Yes, there are basic tenets of what he wants to do and what they're going to do on both ends of the floor. But I think what should excite all Hawkeye fans, after what we've watched over the last, well, honestly, over the last 40 years, 39, Dr. Tom, you did it. I know you did. And I know there's some people that Dr. Tom Davis is a beloved figure. And watching that 2-3 zone, that flat 2-3, and seeing teams shoot 3-pointer after 3, it drove you nuts. And then obviously what we saw here recently on the defensive end of the floor with Fran McCaffrey, outside of the last 2 years with Adam Woodbury in the middle, this team is just brutal on the defensive end. They didn't put in the work. That is not going to be the problem here. Work will be done on the defensive end. You're going to see a team that is going to be connected. They're going to be easy to cheer for. And yeah, we might not be cheering for quite as many of those games in the 80s and 90s, but we're going to see defense. We're going to get defensive stops. We're going to have shot clock violations. You're going to see a team defensively that is so different.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The tournament games happening almost every day. Women's tournaments, men's tournaments, it's all happening. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can check out some NBA lines, the interconference matchup in Detroit tonight. How about that? Pistons host the Spurs. Cade Cunningham and crew have been looking pretty good this season. They're favored against the Spurs. FanDuel has the Pistons laying 8.5. You know, it's not the real Spurs, but that's, you got to play who you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
William Kyle III has joined Devin Williams in entering the transfer portal.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
Devin Williams entered first. William Kyle III is next. And I wasn't necessarily sure that would be the case, but William Kyle, who I thought could have been a key contributor in the next season, could have been a unique big that Mick Cronin didn't utilize as much this year. He is also heading to the portal. Again, this is a guy who was a little undersized, a 6'9" junior, so he's heading to the portal as a senior, went to the NCAA tournament with South Dakota State, was one of their defensive MVPs in the Summit League, carried the Jackrabbits to the tournament in 2024, got to go to the tournament in the Big Dance with UCLA as well. He has also entered the transfer portal. So those are two bigs UCLA's lost. The question, it seems like I've seen from multiple UCLA sources, was Adai Mata heading into today. And that's maybe more emotional because he didn't necessarily commit to playing to UCLA next year. He's like, I just need rest after the season. But here are two bigs behind him. Devin Williams, who is redshirting this year, gone. And now William Kyle, who is also gone. And some might have thought William Kyle, after his dominant performance against Iowa, 28 minutes, 6 of 7, had 12 points, was absolutely electric against the Hawkeyes. That kick-started the UCLA winning streak back in mid-January, over 2 months ago. One would have thought that would have led to more minutes. No, one game-winning block against Wisconsin, and then some double-digit minutes against USC, Penn State in a couple of wins. Had to play a lot of minutes against Wisconsin in the Big Ten quarterfinal, and with Mata in the lineup against Tennessee. He didn't crack the lineup all too much, shot 70% from the field, averaged 3 points per game and a rebound, but it really just didn't work out for UCLA and William Kyle. Again, this is a guy with his South Dakota State numbers. I'm going to pull these up for you right now. At South Dakota State, in 67 games, started almost 50 times, so started majority of the time as a Jackrabbit, averaged 11 plus points per game, 5 rebounds, and a block and a half per game in 67 contests. That is elite defense, and he played in every game for South Dakota State. Now, Cronin mentioned he did miss, I believe, what was the Gonzaga game and the Nebraska game this year, where he had a surgery. I don't think it was ever clarified what it was, but he did have to miss with the surgery. Cronin even alluded to this in the postgame, how the season was thrown off a little bit when Daly got a little hurt, Daimata started the season off hurt, and William Kyle had a little bit of a surgery, but he is somebody that I thought could have been a key contributor, right? Somebody who has 6 double-doubles in his career, was elite athletically, but if we're being honest, the offense wasn't there to translate at this Power 4 level. Not in the Big Ten. He's a little undersized. The athleticism, the defense is there, but the offense wasn't, I think, there enough for Mick Cronin to play him, when in the early part of the season, UCLA would go small. Eric Daly Jr., they would go Tyler Bilodeau as the 5. Mata wasn't out there. William Kyle wasn't out there. So that means Mick Cronin's out there for business. Again, here are the options. It's either more playing time, a different NIL deal or more, or Mick Cronin telling this guy to go out. I don't know what it is, but those are the options. That is how this operates. Kids leave, coaches tell kids to leave, and then there's always money on the table. Those are the options. That is what happens for these players when they're like, I can transfer as many times as I want. I want to utilize my last year of eligibility with more playing time. And he's already played in the tournament. He's led a team to the tournament. He has been on a team that made the tournament at a higher level and gotten a win. So William Kyle is a guy that with a high field goal percentage, maybe with somewhere else, maybe he can be a high mid-major. Maybe he can go to a certain level WCC team, maybe a Mountain West team. I'm not sure what he's looking at, what his options are, but that's a guy who was a Summit League Defensive Player of the Year. All right. He helped win that Wisconsin game because he came off the bench and got the game-winning block to beat a very good Badger team. This is a guy who is very good, and I was hoping could have gotten a lot more minutes this year and especially next year if the Bruins went big. I like the very sparingly used Mata Kyle lineup. You got some offense, you got some size in the post, some backup when it came to length, some backup on the defensive end if you had athleticism. But Cronin, as much as he said he really wanted to try it, didn't try it unless he absolutely had to, just a couple of times. Maybe 2, if not 3 times did he utilize it, but unfortunately it's another Bruin who came in the portal and is also leaving. So that means of the class of 23, UCLA has lost 4 of the 6 commits. For the quick fix 6, I think that Ben Bolch of the LA Times called the 6 transfers. Of these 6 guys, now you see that William Kyle III is gone, and there could be more. I'm refreshing, trying to see, hey, who else might be gone? And at the moment, I don't see that anybody else is leaving, but it is significant to note that there are more spots, more players who might be somewhere looking down the line, right? I was thinking Dominic Harris would be the next one, unless he stays at UCLA, and that would be shocking, but he would be a clear candidate to leave. I didn't know if William Kyle would be that guy, but if he's sitting behind Mata, wasn't getting a lot of time when clearly UCLA struggled with size and he wasn't getting run time, it does make sense for this move to be made from Kyle's point of view. Okay, so we wish him the best. Hopefully he gets a good deal. Between him and Devin Williams, Kyle is the more proven player on the open market. Williams is more of a prospect with his limited usage in 3 years. Kyle's looking for that immediate plug-and-play opportunity where he could probably go and win. So that now leaves 2 spots open. You mix in Dominic Harris, who is another guy I mentioned in the previous episode. I mentioned in the wrap-up post-game wise for UCLA versus Tennessee. Who would it make sense for him to leave? Yes, he didn't get any time. He still has another year of eligibility. And where does that leave Eric Freeney? And where does that leave Brandon Williams? Is Cronin going to tell these guys to go? I know Dylan Andrews has not been a favorite from the fan base because of his play, but Cronin's trusted him. Are any of those guys potentials to leave? I'm not sure, but hey, already day 1 of the portal, 2 Bruins out. Now, if you look at it from the key contributors, are they the core of it? I wouldn't say Devin Williams is, nor would William Kyle have been that core that you need. You have to keep. It is disappointing to see them go. It's disappointing to see that, hey, guys brought in or leaving the next year. That's the day and age of NIL, of transfer portal, of, hey, we need to win. Cronin is feeling the heat. As I mentioned in the other podcast about the Devin Williams transfer, this is a big-time moment for Cronin. He has a missed NCAA tournament, a second-round exit after getting all the, not all, but enough NIL to fund 6 different spots, practically fund a scholarship, if you will, for a UCLA player to be on the team this year. Not a scholarship position, just an NIL scholarship, quote-unquote. And if that led to just a second-round exit, the heat is already turning up. I could see from the fans on social media. Do they want him to go? Does he want to go? Does he want to go to the Midwest? I think he wants to be at UCLA, but I could be wrong because he is a Midwest guy, go be closer to his father. I'm not sure, but the heat is turning up. And after that loss to Tennessee, this is a big season for UCLA as to, hey, was that Final Four run a fluke, or have they been unlucky just to not get back there with injuries and miracle buzzer beaters? Okay, it's crazy how things can change and how much March Madness can make it crazier, but the portal is truly open for business, and Cronin's got to get to work. Like, it is something that's going to keep us up and talking for the rest of March heading into April.